Okay, everyone. Hello, my name is Charles Werner. I'm the Director of Drone Responders. I want to welcome you to a public safety UAS conversation with the FAA's Mike O'Shea and his guest. We have some very interesting topics today, and we are live from the Texas Public Safety Drone Expo, where Mike and his team are located today. Mike, take it away.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike O'Shea with the Federal Aviation Administration. Today, we're in beautiful Florence, Texas, at the Texas Department of Public Safety's Training Academy, where we're here for the Texas DPS UAS Expo. It's an all week long event. They had some training classes, but they have the open sessions today, and then they have the demonstrations tomorrow. But good turnout with a lot of public safety folks. We have people from as far away as Washington State, Florida, Indiana, and all other places across the country. And just to let you know, our team came to Texas on Monday. We drove out to Zapata, Texas, which is on the border, and worked with Border Patrol on some of their UAS operations. The temperature was 91 degrees there on Monday. Tuesday, we drove back to Florence, Texas. The wind chill factor was 32 and the temperature was 46. So it almost half the temperature in one day. It's starting to warm up a little bit today here, but it's still just a little tad chilly. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that are happening in the FAA. John Meehan is on this call, and I hate to make John's, to take him out of the witness protection program or whatever the heck he's doing with his mask there. But his program, the Public Safety Organization Shielded Operations Waiver, has been a huge hit, both at this conference and other places we've been.
That's why I'm in the witness protection program. You guys, my phone has been ringing off the hook and all that. So, all right,
You're actually causing a federal employee to work. So I don't know what you guys are thinking, but it's just wrong. So, but we were also last week, we were at the International Association of Fire Chiefs technical, I can't remember what the TSI stands for, technical something international. I'm brain dead, but same thing. We talked to a lot of people last week about the Public Safety Organization Shielded Operations Waiver. A lot of people think it's probably the ultimate solution for them right now. We'll let John remind everybody what it is here in a few minutes. But I kind of want to talk to you about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to have Matt Rowland from Fort Wayne, Indiana Police Department talk about the Public Safety Organization Shielded Operations Waiver and how they're using it in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And then after he's done, if Jason Day from Texas DPS isn't back up here, we'll turn it over to John. But if Jason's here, we're going to have Jason talk a little about the conference and the turnout, which is really good. And then some of the events that are happening here, and hopefully entice you guys to come next year. The price to attend here is extremely expensive. It's free, except for transportation costs and staying, obviously, but it's a really well worth conference. And if you haven't worked at all with Texas DPS is one of those agencies that doesn't matter what state you're from, they will bend over backwards to help you and provide support. And Jason Day is the epitome of that. That guy would, give you the shirt off his back in 2 seconds to help support your public safety program. Really great guy, really great program, really great agency. And they are probably the largest domestic user of unmanned aircraft systems that are not federal agencies. Federal would probably be Border Patrol. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my good buddy here, Matt. He's going to talk a little bit about what he's doing with his new waiver that he got.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sharing a camera here with Mike O'Shea has been very fun. We are here in Texas. We did a session earlier today on DFR, and we announced the waiver that we were just granted on Monday through John Meehan and his team with the Part 107. And that's why John has blacked out and was wearing a mask earlier to hide. So we're doing DFR from a rooftop in Fort Wayne from a fire station. We have 2 docks, and we're setting up the Iris system, which is the optical sensors. We have had a Part 91 co-waiver that we've had in place that we've been trying to get since May. And about 6 weeks ago, Charles came to me and said, hey, I've got an idea here, brought John on board, start talking about it, and let's file this as a Part 107 waiver. So we started that process. Gavin Hill was also involved with this process with John and Charles. And then the waiver got written with their guidance. I want to give a special shout out to my teammate on my team, Mike Hickman. We have been blessed to have him on our team. We've been able to write all the waivers for our team. Mike has been able to do that. We've never had to pay to write a waiver. And so it's great to have him on our team, be a part of our team. He's one of the 2 full-time folks along with me that's assigned to our team. And typically we do DFR as a 2-man team. But once everything's set up with this waiver now, we'll be able to do it with 1 person. Some of the highlights, it's actually a Part 107-31, Part 107-39, and a Part 107-145 waiver. So it's covering visual line of sight, operation over humans, and operation over moving vehicles. So we have to have remote ID. This does require a parachute. The nice thing about it is under 107, you also have to have a prop guard. But with the parachutes that's approved for Doc 2, when the parachute deploys, the props turn off. And so that gets us with the out prop spinning that complies with the prop guards for Part 107. Our waiver says we can fly over 214 feet. I'm not quite sure where the 214 feet came from. We have to stay under 400 feet. It is a 2-mile waiver. And then we have the iris is our DAA, so detect and avoid is the iris sensor. They gave us a shielded 300-foot outside for temporary use outside of where the irises are set up. So with 4 irises and a 2-mile radius, sometimes you're not completely covering that entire 2-mile radius of the whole area. So we have a 300-foot shielded temporary, as it was explained to us, that we can use if we're going from one area where iris is seeing, if there's any place in between where we can't see with the iris. For the most part, everything else is pretty much 107 rules. We do have to notify manned operations in the area, documented training and operations manual. We have to run the 3-mile anti-collision lights. And if you've ever talked to John Meehan, he will tell you to run the 3-mile anti-collision lights. ADS-B in, which the way that we're able to do that and what qualifies is with drone sense. That's what we're using to fly it. So the ingestion of ADS-B into drone sense basically is basically what the FAA is looking for, and they said that does count. And then the ops are limited to the area that we described in the waiver process. So when Mike submitted our waiver, it was done through Drone Zone. There was a ConOps involved, a ConOps that looks very similar to a Part 91 ConOps, and it had where the irises are located, how far they're spread apart, and then everything that supports all that documentation was in the ConOps. So a couple cool things about it is that it took 5 weeks. So anybody was like us that's had something else out there for a while, 5 weeks is amazing turnaround time. And there's no COA reporting. Since it's under Part 107, we don't have to report under COA. And we can fly help me here if I don't get this right.
No, I was just going to say that, the fact that it took 5 weeks is because you guys were the first. It should, hopefully, and I'm looking at John here wearing his mask. He's darked out. Hopefully the ones in the future, because they've been through this process now, will be quicker.
Yeah, no, I think we just kicked the door open. And the other thing I was going to say is under COA, it's emergency flights. And under Part 107, it's Part 107 flights, which don't have to be emergency flights. So any of the training or anything that you would normally fly under Part 107, you can do now under this waiver. So again, that's kind of the brief synopsis of it. I don't know if John, he keeps jumping in and out. Do you have anything to add, John?
Yeah, I think, Matt and Charles Werner are the reason why I'm into the witness protection program, because people are stalking me now. No, I think one of the key points though also is that you're in Class G, airspace.
Yes, I did not mention
Yeah.
that.
So that's an important factor. So those of you who are in complicated airspace, it is, and as I've always talked with a number of different people, drone as a first responder means different things to different people. There's not sort of one size fits all. And so for Fort Wayne, I think it was not as a complex. They had relatively flat terrain. They had relatively low buildings. So there was it was easier because it was less complex than say others of you who are surrounded by a major metropolitan statistical area and there's class everything around you. So keep that in mind too.
And as a side note too, I didn't bring up. We do know folks are getting the Class C Vail 200-foot waiver. The 200 feet is pretty low for us, and the basically, I guess, the industrial or the urban area where we fly for DFR. So staying under 200 feet just doesn't work really well for us. So that's why we wanted to push something that was closer to the 300 to 400 foot range.
Yeah, and John, so you might say, so if somebody is in a controlled airspace, what is the step? How do they go to try to get the next level? Is there a process for that?
Well, this was the first one we did under Part 107, right? So this is kind of the natural evolution. It started out with public aircraft operators in controlled airspace, and now this is really the first step outside of that. And so I kind of view this as like a crawl, walk, run. And when people, and Charles has heard me say this a million times, and I think I said it even to Matt, which was Matt and Mike, that when you come talk to us about DFR, to us, that's just a marketing term, right? So when you talk to us, we'd be like, yeah, but what regulation are you interested in getting waived, right? So what's the process, right? So under Part 107, the general process really hasn't changed. You're requesting a waiver, and in this case, these guys got a waiver to 107.31, they got a waiver to 107.39, and they got a waiver to 107.145. And the way they got the special provisions was based on what their submission was and what they wanted to do. So they came to us pretty well prepared with, hey, here's our concept of what we want to achieve, and here's what we've done to get that going. And so for us and I'm in the Part 107 waiver team, although I don't write the waivers, I just help facilitate the conversations. But for us, the process, I know it's a long-winded answer, I apologize, but the process is you start with FAA drone zone, right? So you're applying for a waiver to 107.31. So you got to go in, and the waiver safety explanation guidelines, there's something like 40 of them for Part 107.31. You got to start working on that, start having an answer. But can I start talking about, can I shift gears a little bit, Charles, to talk about the Public Safety Organization Shielded Ops Waiver, or do you want me to hold off on that?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So, and the but is, what Fort Wayne got is a complex, not inexpensive solution, right? There's another, and when I've already, since this came out, I've had a number of conversations with a number of departments, and they say, hey man, we want this, we got to have this. And I look at where they are, and they're in Class G airspace. And I'm like, why do you want to spend all this money when you could get a public safety organization shielded ops waiver for much less investment, and it pretty much gets you, what you need. Now their situation at Fort Wayne was they wanted to have a control room, right? They wanted to have the person dispatch it, remotely and all that. But for many of you, understand that this drone as a first responder, that's not a cheap and not a quick solution, right? So, and it's a complex, and it does some great things, but for many of the departments out there, particularly those that maybe don't have huge budgets or don't have very congested urban areas, think hard about maybe just going, at least first start with this public safety organization shielded ops waiver, which will get you beyond, it'll get you beyond visual line of sight out to 1 mile. It'll get you 200 feet above the highest obstacle along the route of flight. And it gets you with minimal equipage. You're going to need an anti-collision light, and anti-collision lights are not your position lights. Please remember that. And you're going to need, this mechanism to stop the blades from lacerating human skin, and an ADSB, and you don't need a visual observer. So I call that the low tech, low investment solution. And then the drone as a first responders, the more complex, more expensive, but it's a great solution. But understand that when you go down the path of drone as a first responder complexity, each one right now is a unique one, and it is going to depend a lot on the systems you have, the procedures you have, and the airspace and air traffic. If you're in controlled airspace, air traffic gets a vote, and they're going to be very concerned about this. So long-winded answer, I apologize.
But John, one of the things that you and I talked about, essentially, couldn't they do this flight from a control room if they were willing to fly within 1 mile? Because it's still BVLOS.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think so. But the public safety organization shielded ops waiver was really designed for the person in the field. Yes, I suppose it could be done. There might be some additional questions, but the whole idea of this public safety organization shielded ops waiver is like you're out there, you got a SAR mission going on. You're looking for a lost kid. You're out there, get going. And if you're in, so I'm not going to say no, and I'm not going to say I know. I'm sure it can be worked out.
It goes to the ConOps and how you're mitigating the hazards and all those things like you've done before.
The more complexity you add, the more conversations will be required. But
I think that what you're talking about
doable.
Is the public safety obstructed shielding is kind of an expanse of the tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver, which previously required a COA, and it limited to only entities of state, local government agencies, which
our goal with that was a Part 107 near equivalent to what they were getting with the tactical, right? Which I always used to say tactical schmactical. You're asking for a waiver to 91 113B, right? So for us, you're using these different phrases, and for the waiver team, it's like, yeah, okay, call it John's special waiver. Yeah, but okay, well, what reg is that? Right. So
the simple answer is, what are you waiving, and how are you mitigating
what do you want waived? Why do you want it waived? What are you going to do to bring a equivalent level of safety to the people on the ground and the other aircraft in the air?
But that tactical waiver is also limited to extreme emergency situations where this one is not, and it's limited to 1,500 feet laterally, where under the public safety obstructed shielding waiver, you can go up to 1 mile.
And there's no Solomon-like discussion about what's an extreme emergency. You decide on when it's appropriate to deploy. We took that. We were like,
and I just wanted everybody on here to know that I am starting the John Meehan fan club to continue to support him in the mission.
Everybody should notice that behind Charles was a giant dartboard with my picture on it for the last 3 years. So
It's still there.
Is it? Okay. Yeah.
I moved it over here to the side.
Oh, did you? Okay. Yeah.
He copyrighted and he's been selling it to agencies across the country.
Oh, I believe that. I mean, does that answer the question? I know it's just about anything public safety wants to do, except for weaponizing drones and dropping tear gas, none of that stuff, right? But a lot of what you want to do is doable, we think. We all want the technology. The technology's probably not exactly where it needs to be to, get to just push a button to fire and forget. I don't think it's there yet.
There is one other element. Under Part 107, there were questions about being able to carry hazardous materials. So if you were doing a defibrillator or you were doing one of the flotation devices, the concern was whatever those things might be considered hazmat. What did you find on that we can still do under Part 107?
It's still a little bit of a murky answer. Technically, you cannot carry hazmat under 107 without an exemption. The question is, does a defibrillator? I mean, typically a defibrillator starts pumping the weight up to the point where it's no longer really eligible for 107, right? So once you hit 55 pounds, you're no longer eligible for 107. And those defibrillators sometimes push the weight up. Is the lithium batteries being carried in the defibrillator? You know, that's not part of the basic operating weight of the drone. It's still a little bit of a
But for public safety, there is a way.
Well, remember, Part 107 was not written with public safety specifically in mind, whereas Part 91 did have public aircraft in mind, and the hazmat rules, there's no prohibition on carrying hazmat under Part 91. There is under Part 107, and it is not a waivable regulation.
I thought there was something about if you were trained for public safety.
That's under
hazmat.
Part 91. The hazmat rules, I looked this up yesterday, as a matter of fact. The hazmat rules say that if you've been trained for first responders, I forget, it's like law enforcement, you know, the usual first responders, if they've been trained on how to recognize and handle hazmat, the rules don't apply to them. But that only works with Part 91. Part 107, when they wrote Part 107, Part 107.36 has an express prohibition, and it is not on the list of regs that can be waived. So that means exemptions. So, you know, the next time there's a revision, notice of proposed rulemaking for a revision of 107, you might want to think about putting some input in there. But
and we should note that if you have a specific question about what's considered hazardous material or not, we can run it by our hazardous material folks, because I know, you know, we're talking about lithium batteries, which most of your drones are probably powered by lithium batteries. So it's just a matter of, you know, if it's you're already flying lithium batteries and you're asking to fly a device that has lithium batteries, it may not fall under our hazmat, depending on their interpretation. So we've had some, you know, we've case by case requests where they've surprised us and said, no, we don't really care if that's, you know, we don't consider that really a hazmat issue. And I know that we'd ran that through when we talked about CO2 cartridges for inflatable life jackets and stuff, and they didn't really get concerned about that. But however, tell us what you want to do. Don't take my comment as approval to fly. But we can certainly take a look at that and work with you to figure out whether that can be conducted under 107, or if we're going to have to push you to Part 91 as a public aircraft operation.
yeah. Yeah, that's not an easy answer, Charles.
Just want to bring it up so people could know that discussion's out there and how to go about looking into it.
Yeah.
So Jason Day's not up here yet, so we can certainly discuss and answer questions that people have until that happens. Some of the common questions that we're getting here, obviously, we've done a lot of discussions about, you know, drone as a first responder, which we call First Responder Beyond Visual Line of Sight, or John's program through Flight Standards, that's his public safety organization, Shielded Operations Waiver. The real issue we're running into a lot of times when we're talking to agencies is, you know, they go to a conference like this, they hear about drone as a first responder, and everybody thinks if agency A has it, then by gosh, agency B has to have it too. Or their chief or sheriff or fire chief goes to a conference and says, I heard, you know, NYPD or FDNY has this, so if they have it, we should have it too. And a lot of times, half of our job is working with public safety agencies to ask them, what do you really want to do? And in most cases, you know, or we talk to most agencies, the likelihood of flying out 2 miles on a regular basis is very slight. The ability to fly out on a regular basis out to a mile is usually more than anybody, probably 99% of the agencies out there, even the ones that have DFR already, really need. In fact, most people we talk to, if they go out a quarter of a mile, you know, that they get a little like, whoa, you know, I'm doing crazy stuff, I need to bring it back. And sometimes the technology doesn't even support flights out farther than a mile. I highly recommend you take a look at the Public Safety Organization Shielded Operations Waiver. The guidance that John has written up on how to get it is basically step by step by step. It couldn't be any easier to apply for. Even Mike O'Shea, who's not the sharpest tool in the shed, could almost probably get a waiver, almost, because, like, again, I would still mess something up. But John's done a really good job of making it easy for people to get that and use it. And I don't think people understand the big plus of this. If you do any kind of drone as a first responder or beyond visual line of sight flight under Part 91 as a public aircraft operation, we are limiting you to what we call emergency flight authorizations, either something you're flying because you're saving, trying to not put your constituency at risk or your officers at risk. But you have to demonstrate that. You can't say, hey, I flew out there because, I was curious what was on the other side of that building. That doesn't qualify as a drone as a first responder flight. However, if you get the Public Safety Organization Shielded Operations Waiver, and John, you got to love that I finally have gotten it right and I'm not mispronouncing it.
Yes,
Because it's an age thing. I couldn't get I kept calling it something different, but anyway, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be emergency operations for that flight. It can be any flight that you're conducting as a public safety agency. You're doing a fire agency, you want to do pre-flights of buildings so you can figure out we're going to do fire operations. Should you have a fire breakout, you're doing all your pre-planning. It's the perfect tool to do this. You can fly down a large warehouse. You can fly around grain elevators that run miles sometimes, and not miles, but a mile. And so you can, this is a really great tool that I think, a lot of you people, if you sit down and figure out what are we going to do, you don't have to have everything, and I'm not telling you not to apply. You can do whatever you want because it's your agency and you have to figure out how you're best going to serve your constituents. But I'm telling you that this Public Safety Organization Shielded Operations Waiver is probably the 99% solution for every public safety agency.
And that's really how we kind of designed it too, was, we wanted to say, look, there's some great things with these Part 91 COAs, right? And they blazed a lot of great trails, but they're getting a little stale in terms of in the terms and conditions. And we looked at, and we had lots of conversations with public safety, and we said, okay, well, what do you really need? And we all want, I call it the holy grail, right? We all want the push a button, off it goes, does magical things, and no rules apply. Well, that's not reality, right? That's not reality. And the rules do apply to you just like they apply to other people. But what we did was we recognize that public safety serves a very good public need. But, for example, we wanted to get away from this whole potential liability issue for you when it may, the public aircraft COA say in an emergency, a life safety situation or a extreme emergency. And, you could just imagine the ambulance chasing lawyers who would have a field day with that if you hit a kid in a stroller, right? Well, and so the Part 107 Shielded Ops, Public Safety Organization Shielded Ops Waiver is a fresh look based on current experience and current discussions. It's really about 5 years or 7 years newer kind of thinking, and based on some real world experience. And we've realized that, look, public safety needs short range. And by the way, these drones typically, remember, they're operating on home Wi-Fi, right? They're not military grade hardened signals, right? So, but what do they need? Hey, they need sometimes they're going to need to go beyond visual line of sight of the remote pilot, and and if you say, well, John, I can see my drone 7 miles away, then you don't understand what 107.31 visual line of sight operation is. When I hear that, that tells me they really don't understand the regulation itself. What 107.31, it's not visual line of sight. It's visual line of sight operation. It's what constitutes a compliant operation. And it is way different than, oh, I can see my drone, that's not just it. There's criteria of like, hey, you have to make sure you're not a hazard. You're not creating a hazard to people on the ground. Well, how do you do that if you can't see them with unaided vision? You can't, right? So that's another reason why we did this. We tried to put ourselves in your shoes to say, look, what would we need if we needed to do this? And we got some great feedback from drone responders and, all of the major agencies. And it's like, no, we need this. And I mean, one day there'll be a wonderful technology where everybody's just going to push the button and everybody's going to, high five and celebrate. That day is not here now. That day is not here yet. So that's.
I just want to add a couple things because I've heard people ask me, why should there be a parachute, and why do we need anti-collision lights? Except it's becoming more accepted now, and John made this pretty clear to me. He said, when you're flying a drone, we have, in most of these cases, when a collision's occurred, the pilot never saw it. The anti-collision light, as he told me, was if I see a red or white strobe blinking in the sky, I know that can kill me.
Yep.
And that has a different reaction than the person who can't see it. The second thing is when they're looking at as the FAA, what are the risks that we need to mitigate here? One is collisions, and the other is what happens if it falls out of the sky.
Right.
And again, if you imagine that aircraft that you're flying drops on a child in a stroller and severely injures or kills that child, one, it defeats the mission that we're trying to accomplish. And the second thing is it endangers all of the DFR and DFR-like programs out there, which would be stopped immediately in its tracks. So we've got to do our due diligence. And I'm just kind of reinforcing John's message, and he's kind of made me a supporter of that mindset to make sure we keep the airspace safe and protect our programs.
Yeah, let me just comment real briefly on that, because that's a great point, right? So since 2017, there's been 13 confirmed collisions. I know I'm sounding like a broken record, right? There's been 13 confirmed collisions between a drone and a manned aircraft. Thank goodness no one's been killed and no one's been injured. There's been some serious damage done to some of the helicopters. 75% of these collisions have happened with helicopters. They've happened below 400 feet. Yes, below 400 feet with helicopters, and above 400 feet. They've happened in controlled airspace and outside of controlled airspace. They've happened in day and night. And in 100% of the cases, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record to some of you who've heard me say this, but in 100% of the cases, when we interviewed the manned pilot in 100% of those cases said, you know what, I never saw it. I saw it when it was too late to maneuver. And me as a helicopter pilot, that, conspicuity of a drone, you look at my background picture, that's a picture of the team that's going to win on Saturday's football game, the Army-Navy game. That's West Point, my rockbound Highland home. But think about a drone on that background. You won't see it, right? It's invisible. Why? Because it's almost the same color as the background. And so a flashing light will help that manned pilot, even though the drone pilot, right, it's the responsibility of the drone pilot to detect and avoid that manned aircraft. But here's the second part of that story. When we interviewed those few drone pilots that we've found in those collisions, 100% of them said, you know what, I was shocked that it was there at that altitude and at that speed. I thought I would hear it. They never heard it. And what were they doing? Were they looking up in the sky? No, they were screen watching, right? And I bet you if you look in the mirror, a lot of people are going to be like, oh yeah, man, when we fly, we're just, we're camera operators, right? Well, guess what? That's not going to cut it if you hit if you have a collision, right? So how do you do that? So as Charles said, what's the best? There's a couple of different ways to mitigate the risk of a collision with another aircraft. Put an anti-collision light on it so they can see you in time to get out of your way, even though you might not be doing what your job is to avoid them, right? And then the other is the ADS-B in. And when if you have conversations with your helicopter brethren and sisters, please help spread the word that, hey, it's time to put that ADS-B out, turn it on, particularly the law enforcement guys who love to, and the military guys who love to turn it off, turn it on, because it's now in your best interest to keep you alive. And then the other one is maybe you want to bump up your altitude to 500 feet and above, right? Asheville, I saw dozens of, and I know I'm ranting and raving here, right? But the other risk, by the way, was laceration. The number one injury from a drone is people getting cut. That's why we have, it's physics. It's physics. But yeah, you've seen the videos of the Asheville, right? Gobs of helicopters flying around, gobs of drones flying around. None of them saw each other. So anyway, I'm ranting.
So, and John's absolutely right. We're actually encouraging people for Christmas to ask for a parachute recovery system, because we're going to try to do a better job of aligning Part 91 operations with 107 operations. And everybody likes, for safety, the idea of having a parachute that can slowly bring down that drone when used appropriately. I've just been joined by Jason Day, who's the UAS coordinator for Texas Department of Public Safety. And Jason's going to talk a little bit about the conference we're at here this week and a little bit about Texas DPS and their drone operations, and hopefully encourage you to come next year, if you're not here already, to the Texas Public Safety Drone Expo. Jason?
Hey, look at that. I got the whole FAA background there. I'm all official. Welcome, everybody. So as Mike said, I'm Jason Day. I'm the Director of Unmanned Aircraft for Texas DPS, and we have drug him and many of his FAA friends down here to Florence, Texas, about 45 minutes north of Austin for our annual Drone Expo. So we started this about 3 years ago. The first year we did it, and it was really about public safety, giving back to public safety and providing an atmosphere where agencies could come out and experience all the different vendors and kind of leverage the network we've got. And our initial feedback was, hey, can you do training as well? So the second year, we expanded it from 2 days to 3 days. This year, we actually expanded it to 4 days. The first 2 days was for paid training courses. They were really expensive, $50 for 2 days of training, which you can't really beat. But we had 6 or 7 different training courses you go through, everything from basic RPIC all the way up to program management, photogrammetry, TAC, all the different levels in between. And then today, which is day 3, is all industry sessions. And this is what's been great is the entire room is just public safety and government employees. No vendors, no media, none of those third parties that are in a lot of the other conferences, because this allows us to have very frank, honest conversations with all of our peers, right? I just got done moderating a panel on prohibited technologies, and we were all very blunt and talk to each other honestly about what's going on, both in Florida and Texas, across the United States. So it's been a whole day of panels like that. And then tomorrow is vendor day. And what's great about this expo is because we have such large attendance of all just public safety, about 250 public safety and government employees, we can bring a lot of vendors in. So we'll have about 50 vendors here tomorrow. And what we're making those vendors that want to do flight demos do is actually put your money where your mouth is. They can't just launch their drone, go up to 30 feet, do a bunch of circles, or go punch holes in the clouds, right? We're giving them a series of scenarios and saying, show me what your drone can actually do. We're putting thermal targets out in the woods. We're putting live role players out there. We're giving them something productive to do to let all these public safety operators actually see their equipment. So today's been fantastic. Tomorrow's going to be even better. And we'll have probably about 400 people here. It's going to be just a great day. So we'll be doing this again next year. You can just Google Texas Public Safety Drone Expo and come join us next year. For day 3 and 4, it's completely free. All you have to do is come here to Texas. So thanks, everybody.
Hey, Jason, before you go,
Yep.
just want to ask, would you mind talking a little bit about how you're seeing TAC start to jump into this drone world?
How we're what?
How TAC is starting to jump into the drone world?
Yeah, absolutely. TAC has been really kind of a force multiplier, to use that term. It's given us a way to collaborate even more outside of the drone world. So if you don't know, Texas has the largest public safety UAS program in the country. Right now, we're at about 380 aircraft, about the same number of pilots. And we conduct about 1,000 drone flights a week, which is great. It's easy to share all of that drone video and telemetry with all the other agencies in Texas and Florida and anybody that comes here to collaborate with us. But then what kind of system do you have to be able to take all of that information and send it down to the boots on the ground, right? Imagine something like we are heavily involved in border operations. So you've got a drone team that goes out with officers that are interdicting folks coming across the border. So a camera hit comes in, they know where people are crossing the border, they drive down the road at 100 miles per hour, get to that spot, launch the drones, they get overhead, and now all the boots on the ground have to go in, and at night, that's all thermal camera. But it's not easy to share all of that information with all of those different partners. TAC has been this piece of collaborative software that works very simply on your phone. And, a lot of things like this don't work great on your phone, but that's what the power of TAC. It's very lightweight. It's very mobile. Works great on Android. Works okay on iOS, but it can ingest basically any data source you want. So you can see the drones on there. You can see the drone video. You can see your drone detection. You can see all of your boots on the ground, all of our vehicles, canine, markers. Any dot that you want to put can now be ingested on that map at scale, which also another lot of platforms can't do. And it's extremely inexpensive. We, Texas DPS, host a statewide server. We have 50 different agencies in Texas that are just using our own TAC server. And sometimes they can be their own entity, or sometimes they flip a button and now we're all joined together and we can do joint operations.
So I want to make an invite to you to come to the March conference and tell us about it when we have it in Busch Gardens again.
What do you say?
I want you to come to the conference in March to present on it.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I'm happy to come up and do I can show everything from, standing up the server, how you integrate drones, and all the boots on the ground, the entire kind of chain there. So
we'll talk.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for Jason? Okay, I'm back. No, it's really cool working with Texas DPS because, like I said before, if you guys have questions about drones or operating drones, Jason is a really great resource. Texas DPS, their philosophy is to help and support others, and they do an excellent job of doing that. And if you, like I told you before, you call Jason, he basically will give you the shirt off his back. I think you did as part of our speakers thing. We got shirts, but Jason's really great resource, and so is the captain for the UAS unit, Captain Aaron Fitch. They're both really great folks to work with and very, very helpful. And if you're in Texas or close to Texas and you have questions about operation or questions about drones, a lot of times in the federal government, we can tell you about our rules and regulations, but we don't operate drones. We're just the regulators. So we're happy to connect you with people who are actually have boots on the ground operating drones and can tell you what works, what doesn't work. And like I said, Texas DPS has been an amazing resource for public safety, just not here in Texas, but across the nation. I did want to ask, I want to not let Matt Rowland run away before we get out of here. But so, Matt talked a little bit about getting the Part 107 waivers to conduct his operations. But what I really want to know is, now that you got it, what are you going to do with it?
We're gonna fly some drones. So we're set up with I guess in my world it seems to be a typical DFR, or what did you say you guys call it? The
First responder beyond visual line of sight.
First responder beyond visual line of sight. Could almost say it. So we use Live 911, and as the Live 911 call comes in, we hear it. We decide if we're going to respond to the call based on what it is, where it is. We geo-fence it, so it's within our response area. But like medic runs come in, all the other stuff that comes in on 911. Excuse me. So we decide if we're going to go to it. Typically, it's going to be an outdoor call or have the potential to be outdoors so that we can see it with the drone. Then we launch the dock. That's taken about 30 to 40 seconds, I think, is what it's a lot faster than it used to be. The technology has caught up with the dock too, and it's working really well. So the drone will then fly there, and then our stats show that we're there about 70 to 75% of the time before officers. And then some of the runs that we're able to go to, we're about a 15 to 20% disregard rate. So we can go to runs and give officers a disregard so they can go to other higher priority runs. And then we're able, I think last year, our stats were about 700 DFR runs. We're a little lower this year because manpower has been just a little bit harder to put together. With this waiver, with the IRIS setup, next year, our calls for service are going to go way up. We're going to be able to respond a lot more. We're going to be able to do more days of DFR. The Doc 2 is absolutely fantastic. For those that remember when on some other stuff that I've been on, some other webcasts, we did in February, DJI brought a dock over and we were able to test that and do the kind of the finalized testing of Dock 2. We got spoiled. It was in the cold. So we were able to buy 2 of those in, I think, October, November-ish. We put those in. The Irish stuff, we'll get the rest of that set up. And then once everything's in place, now that we have a waiver, we'll be ready to do no VO BV loss DFR.
Awesome. So are you only supporting the police department, or are you guys also supporting the fire department, the county?
Mostly city police, because we're 2 miles and we're in the downtown area. However, we do support the fire department. Where we have been perched on for the last 2 years is the rooftop of an apartment building. We're able to see fires. A lot of times before we even hear about 911, we can see them because we can see that much airspace around us. It's been a great place to fly from. But we do support fires. 2 months ago, they had a full alarm tire fire in a warehouse, and we actually were able to fly the drones around that. The fire department asked us to look for hot spots. They had some trouble getting some equipment moved around, so they wanted to do a full view and see where the hot spots were. So we were able to give them a view so that they could see what they needed as we flew around, and then they made decisions on where they were going to put water on it. So we do support fire, but it's mostly a police response.
So we know that Fort Wayne is basically a tropical city.
Yes.
So how does it work operating the drone in the box in the winter?
So the box is heated, so it's climate controlled. And then the batteries so far have proven to be the drone itself. We haven't operated in a ton of cold weather, although this week it's supposed to get cold. And Mr. O'Shea here is sitting in his long sleeve shirt, and it's 62 degrees outside, and I have short sleeves on. And if I wasn't instructing, I'd be wearing shorts. So the difference is at 62 degrees, us Indiana folks can't even believe this is December down here. But the dock so far has been great in the cold weather aspect of it. Like I said, it's heated and cooled, and we had some warmer days as we've set it up, and that didn't seem to affect it at all. The drone itself, we're getting under our BV loss waiver that we already have with the VO, we're getting almost 2 miles out of it. So we have 2 set up side by side on top of the fire station. So one flies, does what it needs to do, and comes back. The other one's already ready to go. So our future plans are, so we have a 400-foot tall building in Fort Wayne, 450-foot tall building. And we can't fly to around that. Obviously, it's a big concrete structure. So our plans are to put 2 more docks on the other side of Fort Wayne. And then we'll have a much better response to kind of the southwest side of the city. That's where we're missing some calls because we can't get over there. But once we add those other 2 docks, we'll have them on both sides, and we're going to be able to respond to more calls as well.
So Charles, just to let you know, I kind of would like to bring Matt back maybe like in the springtime to sort of see what the lessons they learned from deploying these systems, both in the colder weather and then just overall what worked, what didn't work. So we can kind of share that experience with other people who are thinking about using these types of systems.
Sounds like a plan. It's your show.
My show? Okay. Well, that's all I really had for the day. We're going to go back to the conference here and go to some of the more the breakout sessions. But we're happy to answer any questions before we leave. You know, Matt's always a great resource too. If you want to ask questions about how they're operating, Matt could certainly connect you. Sorry, I just got a text message from Kerry Fleming. But he can certainly tell you how they're operating, what they did, you know, what works, what doesn't work, and hopefully we can bring him back in the spring or sometime this summer to talk about, you know, their operation and how it's going, and see if they did actually increase their numbers like he thinks they're going to. Other than that, is if there's not any other questions, that's all I really have for you today.
You can, if you want to email me at it's just Matt MATT.Rowland ROWLAND at City of Fort, spelled all the way out, FORT Wayne WAYNE.org. So Matt.Rowland at cityoffortwayne.org.
Hello.
All right. Well, listen, thanks to everybody for being here. And just so you know, this is recorded and will be in the Drone Responders YouTube channel. John, any last words before we have to give your location?
Only that this Saturday is going to be a very interesting weekend day for me. My youngest son, who crossed over to the dark side of the force, went to that school in Annapolis that shall not be named. But on Monday, I'm very proud to
Go
tell you,
Navy.
he just
Beat Army.
became a rated naval aviator on Monday, and he's a fighter track guy, and very proud of him. But I am disowning him on Saturday, cutting him out of the will for that day. I don't know him on that day. And go Army, beat Navy. That's all.
Congratulations on that with your son, and I know that's makes a proud papa.
Yeah.
And
it's almost as cool as being an Air Cav Army helicopter pilot.
You should know that John had his other son went to West Point like John did, and your dad did too, right?
Yeah, my dad.
But he actually had one son that was actually intelligent, and then went to the Navy Academy. So it was good that one kid got out of that Army mode and did good.
All right, everybody. We'll see you all next January 2025 for the next session of
Go Army.
Bye, everybody.
See you guys.